Netflix prepares to give the film industry a run for its money. The company's Oscar gamble begins this weekend with its first original movie. I'm Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, tech heavyweights prepare for Chinese President Xi Jinping's tech summit in Seattle. Plus, early Twitter investor Sacca takes to Twitter to remind the world he wants Jack Dorsey named CEO. And Uber CEO Travis Kalanick says he knows where to find all the companies making self-driving cars, including Apple. All of that ahead on Bloomberg West. First to our lead. At first it was original TV. Now Netflix is getting serious about film. On Sunday, the company's first original movie, Beasts of No Name, screens before a particularly important audience, critics at the Toronto Film Festival. The gritty drama starring Idris Elba follows an African warlord on his quest to train young recruits. And besides Elba, the film's star power includes the Emmy-winning True Detective Season 1 director, Cary Fukunaga. So what's the end game for Netflix? Joining us now from LA is Paul Dergarabedian, senior media analyst at Rentrak, and Bloomberg media reporter Anusha Sakui, who is in Toronto right now. So Anusha, are you really hearing Oscar buzz about this movie there?
So, as you said, it's going to open to the main TIFF, as we call it, audience. And but it has already screened at two festivals in the past sort of week or so, Venice and Telluride. But those are more cinephile art type festivals that really, you know, Toronto differs because it's one of the biggest festivals of the year along with Cannes, and it also plays to a mainstream audience, so people from the city of Toronto will go to see this film and you'll get the real reaction there. The initial responses from the critics that have seen it are relatively positive, but they're only a small number so far, but so far the buzz is positive.
And, you know, we're hearing it is on a few short Oscar lists. Paul, you know, it's interesting because in order to even be considered for an Oscar, the movie has to open in theaters. So Netflix will be opening this movie in theaters, but also on the same day it starts streaming on Netflix. How valuable would an Oscar be for Netflix in movies at this point?
Well, Emily, I think it'd be really important for them. I mean, to dip their toe in the theatrical production business is a big deal, but they're going to have to get support from theater owners, from the theater chains. That may be a tough road for them, since a lot of the theater chains see Netflix as an interloper of sorts, and you know, a model that is being created that could take away from their business. Now, I think what's going to ultimately happen is that out of all this, we're going to see a lot of changes in the way that things are done. However, I think for Netflix, this is an important step, but again, they're still going to have to get the theaters on board, because if you can't show it in a theater, you can't get an Oscar nomination. Now, remember too, though, this won't work for every movie, and you know, you can't make enough money back on a big budget movie to just go in the on-demand space. But it's definitely Netflix staking a claim and trying to get support at TIFF, as Anusha was saying, by showing the movie and trying to get Oscar consideration.
You know, it's interesting, Paul, because the CEO of Regal actually said, hey, why should I show a Netflix movie in my theater when people can just watch it at home? I mean, personally, I would just watch it at home for free, and I don't think I'd want to pay for it in a theater. So, Anusha, Netflix is walking a fine line. Right. Well,
but it depends on the movie. Like when the new Star Wars comes out, people are going to want to go to the movie theater for sure to see that. But on a smaller movie, the small screen might be a great way to go. But I understand Regal not wanting to, in a way, help Netflix's cause by showing their theatrical films in their theater, and thus perhaps undercutting their own business. And I understand why Regal is doing that. But Landmark will show the film. But all this is going to wash out eventually, because these are new technologies. Netflix is a relatively new player in this side of the business, and when you have a lot of resources like Netflix does to make and produce movies and get them out there, they're definitely a major player. But they still need that support from theaters if you're going to get Oscar nominations. You have to play in the theater.
Yeah, and I think we can agree Star Wars is pretty one of a kind. Anusha, so on one hand, Netflix is walking a fine line with the theaters. On the other hand, they're walking a fine line with the studios, right? Because, you know, they're partners with studios in order to stream, you know, all of the movies on Netflix. But at the same time, doing original content makes them rivals with the studios, right?
Exactly. And, as Paul was saying, Netflix is a disruptor here to the whole industry. So the content producers, the studios, and also the exhibitors. And the exhibitors have sort of been vocal about the fact that they want to protect their typical 90-day exclusive window when a film only shows in a theater and then it goes to home entertainment, which is what they see Netflix as. So the way Netflix will get around it is they will show that film piece in a few independent theaters. You won't see it at your local AMC or your local Regal. You'll have to go to a landmark independent theater and you'll see it there, and that's how it manages to qualify. But also the studios see it as a competitor because it's creating original content and taking viewers away from them. But Netflix itself also is probably seeing competition from Amazon. They're here for the first time at TIFF, looking for potential acquisitions for their new original film platform. And we've heard about Apple wanting to get into original content as well. So Netflix had changed the industry from the TV perspective, and we're seeing it now play out in film.
And, it's interesting because, as I understand it, Netflix has to buy global rights to movies. Amazon only has to buy rights in North America, which means they could be in contention for a lot more, given films that aren't already sold in certain territories. Now, Paul, when it comes to the stock, we've seen Netflix, a lot of volatility there just over the last few weeks, though it is up over 100% so far this year. What's going on?
Well, I think Netflix is in the midst of a total change of their dynamic. I mean, remember back in the day, you just got a DVD in the mail and then you would return it. If you had thought 5 years ago that Netflix would be where they are right now and producing content and at film festivals and trying to get some of that box office dollar from theaters, I think nobody could have seen that coming. But again, because of their growth and the resources they have, they're able to try and break into this space. But at the end of the day, unless they have the money to build their own theaters, which I don't think they do, they're not going to be able to get a broad enough footprint with these movies in a brick-and-mortar movie theater, which is what you need for Oscar. Now, if they just want to get a lot of content out there on their platform and have theatrical films on that small screen, that's what they are, small screen movies. You have to play in a theater first for Oscar. There's a prestige level still with that. There's a much smaller stigma attached to direct-to-video movies now because the content's so ubiquitous and so available. But I think you still got to go in that movie theater. That's the best way to go. But I understand why Netflix is doing this, and they're going to shake things up. They still need those movie theaters to help them on their way, and I don't know if the theaters are going to want to go along for that ride.
Well, and you wonder if a hit might attract more of the good talent, as with House of Cards. Now you have other big stars wanting to make Netflix original series because House of Cards with Kevin Spacey was such a success. Okay, well, we will be watching. Anusha, you're going to have to tell us how the movie is. Anusha Sakui, our Bloomberg News reporter in Toronto, and Paul Dergarabedian of Rentrak. Thank you both. Now, last night, Uber CEO Travis Kalanick appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He defended Uber's planned use of driverless cars and also claimed Apple is working on its own driverless vehicle.
I know you talk about how good this is for drivers, but you said you want like self-driving Uber cars. Then that's not for the driver. We're employing robots at that point. How is that helping? Like livery drivers out there.
Well, look, Google's doing the driverless thing.
Yeah.
Tesla's doing the driverless thing. Apple's doing the driverless thing. This is going to be the world. And so the question for a tech company is, do you want to be part of the future, or do you want to resist the future? And we feel that in many ways we want to not be like the taxi industry before us. And so that's how we think about it.
Now, what you didn't see in last night's episodes was that Kalanick was apparently heckled by taxi driver supporters in the audience. Colbert reportedly joked about the incident, but it was all cut from the final broadcast on CBS. Now, in other Uber news, passengers in New York City will now get some reading material during their drive. Uber will be supplying each car with its first issue of its own magazine titled Arriving Now. At the same time, some more competition. Uber's U.S. rival Lyft may have just made a powerful ally thanks to an investment by China's Didi Kuaidi. Still ahead, why China's President Xi is adding Seattle to his list of cities to visit during this month's big state visit. We discuss next. Plus, the first look inside the sleek shuttle SpaceX wants to use for manned missions. A story we are watching, another executive exit from Yahoo. CMO Kathy Savitt is joining STX Entertainment. Next month, she becomes the movie studio's president of its digital efforts. Savitt joined Yahoo in 2012 and became head of media, leading important properties like Yahoo Finance and Sports. This change follows other shakeups at the top of Yahoo. Earlier this year, Yahoo said it promoted Lori Mann to Chief Information Officer, replacing Mike Cale, who stepped down after less than a year on the job. Now, another story we are watching, Twitter. Venture capitalist and early Twitter investor Chris Sacca once again taking to Twitter to tweet about Twitter and its CEO search and voice his support for Jack Dorsey. It's time for the board to formalize the obvious, he tweeted, making Jack the CEO and let everyone get back to focusing on making Twitter better than ever. The market knows that Jack has such strong teams at both Square and Twitter that he can run both companies. This is settled. He, Jack Dorsey, has the full support of the key players at Twitter and its largest investors. Earlier this year on Studio 1.0, I asked Sacca if he was becoming an activist investor, which he sort of demurred, but said why he really wants to fix Twitter.
I have been invested in Twitter since the first time anyone could invest in Twitter. I've been a user since 2006. I've just been obsessed. It's a huge part of my business. But there's more than 1 billion people who've tried it and not stuck around. Twitter needs to be easier and more exciting and less intimidating for all those people.
Turning now to China. President Xi Jinping's first state visit to the United States is scheduled for later this month. Ahead of his meeting with President Obama at the White House, President Xi will be attending a tech summit in Seattle organized by the Chinese government. Here's what we know. Bloomberg has confirmed that Alibaba founder Jack Ma will be there. Uber has been invited to participate. The New York Times reports Apple's Tim Cook plans to attend, and invites have been sent to Facebook and Google as well. President Xi will also attend a dinner hosted by Microsoft's Bill Gates at his home, according to the Wall Street Journal. It's interesting given President Obama's hard line on China and President Xi's hard line on U.S. tech companies. I want to bring in now Tom Nagorski, Executive Vice President of the Asia Society, and Gordon Chang, who worked as a lawyer in China and Hong Kong for nearly 2 decades. So, Tom, I'll start with you. What do you make of the Chinese government organizing its own little side trip ahead of this state visit and sort of undermining the White House as the White House is considering sanctions on Chinese businesses for hack attacks?
I actually think it's a smart move, and I don't know to what extent they're undermining, the White House. I'm sure the White House has been made well aware of what's going on. Xi Jinping was coming in the Pacific direction, and I know it's well known that the Chinese have been sort of obsessed about the choreography, not just of the state visit to Washington and the visit here to New York, but also what would be the other city, the other non-governmental, non-bilateral venue they'd have. And Seattle's an interesting choice. I mean, you went through the guest list there. I'm sure we'll be learning more about others that he'll be seeing. But it's, nobody on that list is likely to say no to a Chinese president. And, this is a relationship right now, the U.S.-China relationship, that is in need of some, should we say, win-wins at the summit. And I suspect they were looking for something that would be business-friendly, friendly generally to the Chinese, more so than the Washington visit may be. And I think it's a smart move.
Yeah. It's interesting, Gordon. Would you agree that there's no undermining going on here? Because as I understand it, some folks in Washington aren't too happy about this. And I wonder, obviously Facebook is blocked in China. Google decided to leave the country. What do they actually have to gain from meeting with the Chinese president?
Well, first of all, they do not want to turn this down, as you just heard. But also, of course, they're undermining the Obama administration, because it's been very well known, because the Obama administration has leaked that they want to impose sanctions on Chinese companies for receiving information that they use for commercial purposes. And Beijing, first of all, wants to make sure those sanctions are not put in place. But also, I think that they want to recreate the China business lobby, because that has fallen on hard times given all the events over the last 3 or 4 years. So, yes, of course, it's undermining the Obama administration. That's why they're doing it.
So, Tom, what would you single out as the most important issues on the agenda between not only President Obama and President Xi, but President Xi and, for example, Tim Cook or Mark Zuckerberg?
Well, those are two very different questions. I think when you look at the U.S.-China relationship, you're looking at the problem spots and you're looking at the areas where they've got to try to find some accommodation. The problem spots is a long list right now. I mean, Gordon just mentioned some huge issues that, by the way, I think the administration shares with a lot of those business people. And I suspect, although it may be a nice public relations looking thing in Seattle on the public face, the Chinese are going to get an earful from some of those same business people. And it isn't, by the way, just, I think, the high-tech CEOs who you mentioned. He will be meeting a lot of other high-level business people. I think Warren Buffett is going to be there. But so there's that. There's a lot, there's cyber. There's all sorts of issues that have been on the table for a while. Access to markets, IPR, intellectual property issues. But then, in terms of common ground, I think one to watch, and it may have a place actually both in Seattle on the tech front and also in Washington, maybe even here in New York at the UN, has to do with climate change. That is one of the few areas where the two governments have some common ground, where there's been some positive and constructive engagement. I think you can look to hear some statements about that issue on the way out.
And quickly, Gordon, the Journal reporting that President Xi is also going to be having dinner with Bill Gates at his house. What do you make of Gates' special access here?
Well, Gates has had special access for a long time, but that hasn't prevented Microsoft from having very severe problems in China. And actually, I think the same thing's going to happen to Tim Cook. Cook has said some really nice things to Jim Cramer about the strength of the Chinese economy, but it's not going to help Apple, which now has a tax case against it. And, basically they're supporting Huawei, the Apple competitor. So I don't think this is going to be an easy ride for any U.S. company, especially Apple and Microsoft.
Though we should mention that Apple has made huge headway in China, getting the last big carrier, China Mobile, on for the iPhone. The iPhone is huge in China, though certainly, as you mentioned, Gordon, not without challenges. Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China, and Tom Nagorski, Executive Vice President of the Asia Society. We will be watching this visit very closely the week after next. Now, in today's Out of This World, 2 multi-million-dollar views, SpaceX releasing these images of the inside of the new Dragon spacecraft. This is what the company is hoping to use to send astronauts to the International Space Station in 2017 if it beats out Boeing. SpaceX is developing this under a contract with NASA that's potentially worth $2.6 billion. Also out today, stunning new pictures of Pluto captured by the New Horizons spacecraft. The latest snapshots reveal an even more diverse landscape than scientists had imagined before New Horizons swept past Pluto in July. So much data was collected in that flyby that it's going to take until next fall to receive it all here on Earth. Coming up, matchmaking for mergers and acquisitions. We'll talk to the CEO of Axial. And it is time now for our Daily Bite, one number that tells a whole lot. And today it is 198. That is the average number of minutes Americans spend inside mobile apps, according to a report from Flurry Insights. It's the first time ever that the amount of time spent inside apps has exceeded the number of hours we spend watching television. The figure doesn't include time spent inside the mobile browser, even though that is technically an app too. If that was included, time spent on mobile apps would reach 220 minutes, or 3 hours and 40 minutes a day. While time spent using apps is increasing, the time spent on TV hasn't changed from the second quarter of 2014. It's a little depressing. Well, you can use LinkedIn to search for a new job, but if you are looking to grow or sell your company, you might want to meet my next guest. Axial uses an algorithm to help match companies and investors. Joining me now from New York, Axial CEO Peter Lehrman. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. So, give me some examples of companies that have used Axial and how it's helped them.
Yeah, we're focused on helping companies that are in the middle market. So these are businesses with anywhere between typically $5 and $200 million in revenue. They're not part of the startup economy, and they're not part of the pre-IPO market either. They could be $20 million building products companies. They could be a kitchenware business. They could be an established software company. The main difference between us and some of our peers is our focus on these established revenue-generating companies as opposed to the pre-IPO or the startup economies.
And you guys are actually launching a mobile app yourselves. Why is something like that important? As I understand it, you say the biggest competitor is the handshake.
Yeah, for sure. We decided to launch the mobile app now instead of years ago because we've got so many customers that in the early days were on BlackBerries but are now on the iPhone. And a lot of our customers in private equity and in corporate development are constantly on the road. And in a market like today's where the competition for deals is just incredibly fierce, our customers want to be able to respond right away to a seller when they're reaching out about a deal. In fact, being the first to respond to a deal on Axial, at least, we've done the homework on it, and you actually have a 19% greater chance of closing the deal if you're the first person to respond to the seller. So being able to put the deal flow in the palm of your hand when you're traveling, when you're at a conference, when you're on the road, is a big, big consideration for our customers because the competition for deals has just gotten so tight.
What's your view on the M&A outlook right now, given the volatility that we've seen in the stock market, concerns about a private tech bubble, for example? Do you see M&A speeding up or slowing down?
I think in order for M&A to really, really come down or really decelerate, there'd have to be a huge, huge correction or a really, really big deceleration of the economy. The fact is, at least in America, baby boomers are retiring at a really accelerated rate right now, and they're going to be retiring regardless of interest rates, regardless of stock prices, and that's going to put a tremendous number of businesses into the market over the next 5 years. So I think if something really terrible were to happen, it might really put a pause on M&A. But otherwise, we see just volume just continuing to be really, really strong. In fact, August was the most active month on Axial. We've had, in our history, we had over 1,000 digital signatures signed in the month of August, which is the leading indicator for deal flow.
All right. Peter Lehrman, CEO of Axial. Thanks so much. We'll be watching the market conditions to see if you are indeed correct. That does it for today, this edition of Bloomberg West. It's Friday, so have a wonderful weekend. And on Monday, do not miss my interview with the co-founder of TomTom. We'll be talking mapping in the age of driverless cars. See you then.